Freight Efficiency with NACFE's Mike Roth and Friends.
Here in episode 76, we're joined by Jason Cannon. He's editor-in-chief of CCJ, where he talks about what brought him into trucking, why he stayed for a decade, the history of CCJ, and what he sees as his role in covering the industry. He also shares his thoughts on the benefits of run on less, the industry's ability to handle all the new technology it is facing, and he offers advice on how the industry can navigate through the current market changes. Today we have joining us Jason Cannon. Jason's the editor-in-chief at CCJ, Commercial Carrier Journal magazine. Really good to have you on today, Jason.
Glad to be here, Mike. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you. As always, I always enjoy speaking with you, regardless of what we're talking about.
We title this Mike Roth and Friends, or Freight Efficiency with NACFE's Mike Roth and Friends. Do you recall how our friendship came about, Jason?
You know, Mike, you've always been real generous with your time, and you've been a guest speaker at some of our old trucking industry symposium events. If you even remember those, we've not done them in a while. And that was back when being in person was kind of a requirement. You couldn't meet and talk to people if you weren't actually looking at them, and we don't have to do that anymore. So, I'm not sure that I could pinpoint the first time we met, but I feel like there's a high degree of probability that it was at one of those.
Yeah.
And over the years, I don't know that there's been a trade show hardly that you and I have not spent some time together. And I've been in this industry for about a decade. So that's 10 years of us bumping into each other. Oh, wow. 4 or 5 at least times a year.
So let's talk about you personally, and then we'll get into the trucking and media and all that sort of stuff. But you said you've been doing this 10 years. I mean, what brought you to it and what keeps you in it, Jason?
Well, I kind of took the long way around to the trucking industry. I spent about a decade in the newspaper business, and my tour of duty consisted mostly of small dailies and weeklies. And really, I got into the newspaper business at the absolute worst possible time. I mean, it was so bad I should get an award for it. The industry was basically imploding on itself. And a couple of newspapers that I used to work for don't even exist anymore. Now, later into my career, I was pretty lucky. I was running a newspaper in a town called Demopolis, Alabama. That's where I live right now. So I was running this town's newspaper, and we were pretty successful, making money. But at a small newspaper, you're sort of everybody's everything. I was the reporter, the writer, the editor, the ad salesman, the complaint department. I had people call in my house, show up on my front porch, wanting to talk about newspaper business at all hours. And that's just kind of the cost of doing business in a small community newspaper. That really didn't so much bother me. But, I had a couple of little kids at the time, and, they were getting tired of attending Chamber of Commerce awards dinners and council meetings and eating dinner in the newsroom. So I saw an opening for an online editor with CCJ's parent company, Randall Riley. Their online philosophies kind of matched my own. Not to get too deep into the weeds, but I'm right now, I sit here right now, 42 years old. So I sort of grew up with the internet. I didn't grow up alongside of it. It didn't exist when I was a kid, but when I got into high school and college, it became more prevalent. And I had some internet content philosophies that didn't match with my supervisor, and that was a point of contention. It's when I interviewed with Randall Riley for the online position. I started asking some questions about how they treat their print products versus how they treat their online products. And I was very quickly told that they don't see it as a versus, they see it as complementary. And that was eye-opening, because I've been telling my supervisor at the newspaper for years that you by proxy, you and me, we treat our online presence as a competitor to our print product when they should be complementary. We were a weekly at the time, and the internet's 24/7. So why we don't treat that like a daily and then supplement the daily with a weekly print product? I never understood that, but I never could convince them. And now here's this company that not only agrees with it, they're already doing it. So when they offered me that job, I kind of felt like this was the place for me to be. I didn't know anything about trucking at the time. The only thing I knew about trucking was 18-wheelers had 18 wheels. I sit here today, a Class A CDL holder, and I've had a CDL for, I think I've renewed it twice. So that'd be about 6 years, that'd be 8 years, because I've renewed it twice. I do all of our test drives. I've gotten to drive commercial trucks on several different continents, which has been really cool. And you go back 12 years and you tell yourself this is what you're going to be doing in 12 years. And I would have thought you were completely insane. I didn't know a job like this even existed.
Let's talk about CCJ a little bit. I mean, it's well over 100 years, right? And so it's been around, I think, as long as trucks have. And so tell us about its history and why that fits so well with what you're trying to do there.
Oh yeah, CCJ was founded in 1911, so that's 112 years ago. So here's your history lesson for the day. And I mean, you know this, but Alexander Winton is credited with inventing the semi-truck in 1898, I believe, and he sold the first manufactured semi-truck in 1899. So CCJ has been around about as long as the trucking industry has existed. If CCJ was a truck manufacturer, we would be the second oldest behind only International. Companies like White, who would have been around longer, they don't really count because they're not in business anymore. Our ranking is the second oldest truck manufacturer if we were one, it's really not even close. And I think Cummins, who came along around 8 years later, it would have been in third place. So, I mean, it's over 100 years. This magazine, this publication has covered the transition from, I think, what they used to call the horseless carriage to we're sitting right here on the cusp of driverless trucks and fully autonomous or semi-autonomous trucks and electric trucks and hydrogen trucks. So, that's quite the march through history there.
Yeah, and I don't know if you know this story, but I'm going to share it with you because it's really fun. NACFE started out of a workshop in 2009, and we became a nonprofit and started work in 2010. And then shortly after that, someone at CCJ, and I'm trying to remember who it is, but around 2011, maybe 2012, probably 2011, I received a phone call. And they said, you know what, you got this NACFE going on. Actually, at the time, I didn't want it to be called NACFE, Jason. I called it North American Council for Freight Efficiency. Everybody yelled at me because it was so long. But he said, I've got an idea for you guys. And I said, what? And he goes, well, back in it must have been in one of the first publications. So back, I looked it up the other day, March 15th, 1911 edition, CCJ announced a competition amongst fleets and truck drivers and their trucks as to who was the most efficient. And the thing read so interesting to me as we were starting NACFE up. I was like, wow. And he goes, you want to try to do this? And I'm like, oh man, we're just getting started. We can't do that. There was $1,000 prize back in 1911. Well, long story short, they announced it and never executed it. So there never was a competition. And he was trying to say, okay, for the 100th year of CCJ, let's do it together. This was 2011 and so forth. Well, we weren't ready for it. But you know what? That was sort of the early inspiration for Run on Less that we did in 2017 when we brought 7 truckers together. So I don't know. Had I ever told you that story, or have you ever heard that that was an efficiency competition dreamed back in the early days?
No, you've never told me that. And that's interesting because, I mean, you think about efficiency as we define it today and think about what it would have been defined as, 100 and whatever years ago. That would have been wild. That's cool.
Yeah. And that horseless carriage, I mean, I've thought about that, and we've thought about it some here at NACFE as we look at the transformation to electric and hydrogen and those sort of things. Can you imagine somebody suggesting, hey, we're going to put this thing in this on wheels here that's going to explode every so often and create power to run the wheels, and we're going to put gasoline in it, and oh my god, I can't fathom how blasphemy that would have been back in the day. So hey, so you've been close to our Run on Less program. How would you describe that and what it's done for the industry, and is it a good thing, and how's it helped?
I think NACFE does a really good job of using data and maybe a little bit of science to refute what I think is often some widely held misconceptions. For example, some of the takeaways for me personally from the 2017 run was that, yes, 10 miles per gallon is doable. And no, you don't have to coast at 44 miles an hour across flat terrain just to get there. Now, granted, you do need some aero help. You do need a fuel conscious driver. You do have to make some decisions specifically with fuel economy in mind. But that run showed that 10 miles per gallon isn't just some pie in the sky, phony boogeyman like number that real drivers can't get.
Yeah, I remember standing up. You were probably at our press event where I yelled, "We got 10.1 mile per gallon." That was real trucks, real freight, and that goes back now. It's 2017, so that goes back 6 strong years, and we've made a lot of progress. It's amazing. You cover and similar to us, and we've all sort of turned to the future. I mean, maybe you've always done that, but we got a lot of technologies coming at us fast and furious. You mentioned them earlier. Automation, electric, hydrogen, connectivity. A lot of stuff is coming at us fast. Can we handle it all as an industry? I know the industry's has a lot more diversity. We have a lot more money coming in, but man, we to your point on toilet paper earlier, we still got to deliver the goods while also figuring all this out. How do you see our ability to do it?
I hear a lot of people talk about the transformation of the transportation industry, and I don't know that I would yet call that a transformation, just because transformation is a process and transformations happen in stages. And I think we're really early in this transformation. And I think maybe even stage one, which I think we would probably define as the realization stage, the realization that something's happening, something needs to happen, but you're not quite ready to start picking winners and losers or making major decisions. We're still trying to figure out what's going on. We're still trying to decide what the next big thing is. Is it battery? Is it hydrogen? Is it driverless trucks? Is platooning seems like it wants a seat back at the table. But I think all this is good. And you and Rick have been saying this a lot recently, that, there's no magic bullet. There's no one size fits all. There's no one solution for everybody. And not everybody can work with full battery electric. So there's hydrogen for those customers. Well, there's not really a hydrogen network, and you can't really use battery electric, so you can't make any efficiency strides. Well, that's where all these moving pieces kind of come in handy. So maybe you're a candidate for renewable diesel. Maybe you're a natural gas candidate. Maybe autonomy is your thing. You were kind of in this, there's something for everybody period. And I think that's good.
Yeah, I do too. Just playing with that for a minute. We're not this isn't a big market. Sometimes people look at the car market, 15, 16, 17 million cars a year sold in the United States. You look at the truck market and, class 8, 250 to 300,000 a year, with a third of that being vocational trucks, which, have their place. But oftentimes, we're working in NACFE, we're working on, dry van and reefer and heavy tractors. So now we're talking, 180 to, or maybe even less than that, like 150 to 200,000 trucks a year. And if we got all these solutions, and yeah, I agree, a lot of solutions are important, and trucks are used in different duty cycles and different regions. So one technology makes sense here and another makes sense somewhere else, but diesel engines were pretty forgiving and they worked pretty well everywhere. Now we're entering a time where, a lot of variation, not a lot of volume, and that worries me.
Yeah, I mean, I get that, and I don't disagree with that at all. But I think, we've seen over the last several months, and we'll continue to see, for the foreseeable future, the regulatory environment's going to drive, it's going to drive a lot of engineering, which the engineering is going to drive a lot of decisions. So I guess you can either get on board or have the on board thrust upon you is really kind of the only options that you've got. If you're a fleet out there, you got to decide which makes sense for your operation. And, I think the fact that there are lots of different options that, like renewable diesel and natural gas, for example, they're not zero emission solutions. So if you're susceptible to a zero emission mandate, the number of things that you can do, it's pretty finite. But if you're just looking at reduced emissions, you can go zero, you can go near zero, or you can trade in your, 1998 truck for a 2024 truck. I mean, that's the easiest way to reduce emissions, is just run newer equipment. It's easy for me to say, I don't have to buy them, but I mean, there's lots of different ways to kind of get down this path without having to pick a winner or a loser right now.
I think you're right. And I think their shippers are starting to say, hey, I want my freight hauled more sustainably. And, right now they're kind of asking for zero emission vehicles, which, for a lot of their duty cycles, you can't have an electric truck. Hydrogen isn't here yet. So some of these other solutions are there. And I think they're going to start to, consider paying more or leaning in and helping the fleets with these decisions. So, I think there are choices fleets can make. And the manufacturers around all these different technologies. I also wanted to get in with you around new players in the marketplace. I mean, obviously, for something like automation, technology providers are necessary because that's a whole new kind of thing. But when you look maybe at electric or hydrogen or some of these others, we've got some new truck players. We've got a whole lot of them in the small trucks, which I don't think we want to talk a whole lot about, from like the canoes and the Rivians and so forth. But even when we get into heavy trucks, we've got the traditional manufacturers working to continue to supply diesel trucks while they're working on all these alternatives. And then we got folks like Tesla and Nikola looking only at zero emission. And then we got folks like Hyliion and some others coming up with some of these messy middle technologies, we call them. So I guess in your work, let me ask you a very specific question. In your work of writing about these things, analyzing them and writing about them, how do you view the different player types, the different OEM types?
I don't try to view them differently. I try to be wholly objective in my coverage of everything. And I can give you a pretty good example here that I personally took some heat for CCJ's coverage of Trevor Milton and Nikola early on. And it got kind of thrown in my face when Trevor was convicted of fraud. But I didn't treat Trevor any differently than I've treated any of the other trucking OEMs. And I've interviewed them all, most of them many times. I asked him a lot of questions and I printed what he told me. My role in this, as I see it, is I gather information that I think is relevant to my readers, and I do that by asking questions and follow-up questions and more questions. Then I package all those answers into an unvarnished information resource. As far as vetting product claims go, as I mentioned earlier, I do have a CDL. So I get to do a lot of test drives of a lot of new equipment, and I try very hard to lay bare what my experience is with that equipment. If it's battery electric and I hop in it with a 250-mile range, I drive for 100 miles and I get out of it with a 30-mile range when it should be 150. I include that in the review, but I give the OEM an opportunity to explain it. Is it something that I did? I have a CDL. That does not make me a professional truck driver. There are people who know how to finesse a battery electric powertrain to get the full 250 out. I make no claim to be that guy. So when I don't do it, here's your opportunity for me to say, hey, CCJ readers, I drove this electric truck. I should have only used 100-mile range. I used twice that. And here's XYZ OEM telling you why. Again, I'm just here to provide the information. I don't necessarily care if it's a good or bad experience. I just care that that experience is relayed accurately. I've driven some of the autonomous platforms. I treat that the exact same way, that this truck is supposedly capable of this. Well, here's my experience of, when I set it into full autonomous mode. You try to put yourself in you legally can't go in the bunk and go to sleep. But when you put it in full autonomous mode and you're still sitting there in the seat as a safety driver, doing what the safety driver would be doing, which is basically just kind of monitoring your surroundings, I'm kind of taking inventory of what is this truck doing? Okay, well, this car just cut me off. What should it fixing to do? And did it actually do that? And what did that feel like? Did we slam on the brakes because somebody cut us off? Or does the system take into account the closing speed? Is this car running away from me? It cut me off, but it's going faster than I am. So is it light brake pressure? Does it try to anticipate that the car is going to clear, so there's really nothing for it to do?
Yeah. Well, first of all, congratulations on having that CDL. I think that is important. And, not bragging, but I feel the same way driving a motorhome like I do with so many miles. It doesn't qualify me to be a professional truck driver, but I understand somebody slamming on their brakes right in front of me and trying to stop a pretty big, heavy motorhome in a quick amount of time. Hey, so back to these startups versus the startups and the traditional manufacturers. I mean, the startups, they don't have the the legacy and the history, and so that's a benefit, but that's also a huge consequence because they don't have customers today to work on and, evolve or create new products for. And, oftentimes they're being driven by the investment community to get there fast. And so there's a tendency by the startups to maybe overpromise some things. How do you, as you're doing this unbiased work, or this, the work you do, how do you separate all that? Does it just take more work sometimes?
Just from a vetting perspective, if a new OEM tells me something, I'm going to quote them just like if it was Freightliner or Volvo. I may ask some extra questions because I would have prior report. We'll use Freightliner as an example. So, I've got a decade of covering Freightliner. I'm familiar with their product suite. I'm familiar with their capabilities. Everything that's kind of come and gone in the last 10 years I've been on the job. So if Jason and Mike's truck company comes up with this new widget, new truck, technology, whatever, and it's capable of doing X, well, I'm going to dig into that a little bit more. How do you have this capability and why are you the only one that has it, right? So if the Jason and Mike electric truck has 1,000 miles range, at the same curb weight as the e-Cascadia, the logical question is if that's possible, why are you the only one that can do that? And then when you hit me with what's proprietary, then that's when the red flags start going off. I can understand that you don't want to give away, all your trade secrets, but at some point you're going to have to go public with, this is how we get what we're getting. And this is how it all works. I mean, we don't have to know the battery chemistry. We don't have to know all the little bits and pieces that go into making the sausage. But I mean, this is a very weight driven business. And if you're going to tell me that, your truck gets twice the range as every other electric truck on the road, and you won't tell me how, I have to assume your truck weighs twice what all the other electric trucks on the roads weigh. So, I mean, I don't know that really answers your question. The legacy guys, I guess, have a slight benefit of their history, and that we're all just more familiar with their go-to-market strategies. We're all more familiar with some of their successes and failures along the way, where the new guys kind of have to come out and acknowledge, hey, we're new, we're still trying to figure our way out. This is what we think we're capable of. And then it's kind of on people like me and you, that if we can get experience with equipment, that's a huge help. If you come out with a new truck and tell me it's capable of doing something and I can drive it, then there's nothing that beats seat time. I mean, Zoom calls are great, interviews are great, press conferences are great, but if you're telling me your truck is capable of doing something and you will let me try to make it do that, that's huge.
Given your experience, what's some advice you would give to all the listeners out there? We're all the people paying attention to this podcast are all trying to create successful products that, have less emissions and are much more efficient. And they're looking at all these plethora of different solutions out there. I mean, what's some of your advice, maybe for not only just fleets, but just sort of everybody trying to help fleets navigate these times?
I think just keep an open mind. I don't write all these stories on autonomous trucks, for example, to convince anybody that they need to get rid of all their truck drivers as soon as possible, or I'm not trying to send any kind of signal that the job of a truck driver is a dying career path. My goal is to offer our readers a snapshot of, this is what's currently possible. This is who's using it. This is how they're using it. And this is what they're getting from it. So you, as a reader, I hope you take that information for what it is, which is, a real-time report on what's going on around you. That would be, that would be my advice, is just to take a big step back and just consume the information, and then try to form your own opinions around it. I mean, I like I was saying earlier, I'm not here to pick winners and losers. I'm not here to crown the next big thing. I'm here to put all of the next big things in front of all of my readers, and they can decide what works for them and what doesn't work for them. The guy at XYZ Trucking may be all in on electrification. The guy at ABC Trucking may be all in on autonomy. And that's completely okay, because one solution may work for that guy and it doesn't work at all for the next guy. So that's going back to my original point. Having all these things in the air, having all these plates spinning, I think is really important. Otherwise, I think you get a lot of people mentally check out. That, we spent a lot of time when I first came into this industry talking about natural gas. When when I came in, that's all I heard about was natural gas. And we didn't really have a whole lot going on at the time. Autonomy and platooning sort of came up after a couple of years, but if you weren't a candidate for natural gas, there was really no reason for you to follow this innovation space, because that was kind of the only thing going on. And now we've got so much. I think there's a lot out there that if you're interested in creating some extra efficiencies, if you're interested in new technologies, there's one out there for you to find. There's one out for you to follow. There's one out there that you can kind of educate yourself about. Even if you've already decided that one of these is not going to work, there's probably one out there that is.
Yeah, so great advice, Jason. Thank you. And I'd like to encourage everybody to read as much as you can. NACFE actually blogs quite often on CCJ with Jason, so just a good place to learn and take those next steps. Thank you so much for being on, Jason.
I'm glad to do it, Mike. I appreciate what you and Rick and your team do for us personally with your blog and what you're doing for the industry.
Freight Efficiency with NACFE's Mike Roth and Friends.